You have broken a rule. Maybe you took more than your share of the kill. Maybe you slept with somebody you should not have. Maybe you killed someone. Now look around. There are no police, no courts, no prison, because prisons have not been invented yet and could not have been fed if they had. There are about 30 people here, and every single one of them knows exactly what you did. And think for a second about why a prison is impossible in this world. A prisoner has to be fed, watched, and housed by people who are already working every daylight hour just to feed themselves. Locking somebody up means paying for an adult who produces nothing. No foraging society on Earth can carry that cost, which quietly removes the one option modern justice leans on most. So what happens to you? That question has a real answer, and it is not the one most people expect. Because when you go looking for the worst thing ancient humans ever did to a rule breaker, you find something stranger than cruelty. You find that for most of human history, the harshest punishment available was not pain. It was being removed. But start with the honest problem, because it shapes everything that follows. Punishment is very hard to see in the ground. A broken skull tells you somebody was hit. It does not tell you whether that was war, a feud, a murder, a hunting accident, or a sentence carried out by people who believe they were doing justice. Archaeologists have three main things to work with: injuries on bone, the position and treatment of a body, and whether a person was allowed the normal burial their community gave everybody else. That third one turns out to matter more than the first. And there is one more source, which needs handling with care. Written descriptions by outsiders. Usually Romans. Usually about people they were at war with. Keep all of that in mind. Almost nothing ahead is certain, and I will tell you when it is not. Now, the deep past. The oldest strong candidate for a human killing another human is a skull from the cave system at Atapuerca in northern Spain, from a shaft called Cima de los Huesos, the pit of bones. The skull is known as Cranium 17, and it is somewhere around 430,000 years old. It has two penetrating fractures above the left eye. Both appear to have been made by the same object, striking twice, from slightly different angles. A fall does not usually do that. Two deliberate blows do. So somewhere around 400,000 years ago, long before our own species existed, somebody hit somebody else in the face twice and killed them. What we cannot say is why. That is this entire problem in one sentence. We have the act and nothing else. Jump forward. At Natiruc in Kenya, roughly 10,000 years old, researchers reported the remains of around 27 people, including women and children, with fractures, embedded projectile fragments, and in a couple of cases positions suggesting the hands had been bound. It was published as some of the earliest evidence of warfare between groups of foragers. It was also immediately challenged. Other researchers argued the fractures could be explained by the sediment and by the way bone breaks in the ground, and that the binding is not clear. I am not going to resolve that for you, because it is not resolved. Then there is Otzi, the man frozen in an alpine glacier about 5,300 years ago. He has a flint arrowhead lodged in his left shoulder, a deep cut across his right hand, and a full stomach. He ate a substantial meal shortly before he died. Read those together. He was not starving, and he was not fleeing exhausted. He stopped, he ate, and then somebody shot him from behind and left a valuable copper axe lying beside him. Whatever that was, it was not a robbery. Beyond that, people have argued about it for 30 years. And then the Neolithic turns ugly in a way that is hard to look away from. At Talheim in Germany, roughly 7,000 years old, a pit held dozens of people, many with blunt injuries to the back of the head, thrown in together with no arrangement at all. Similar sites exist at Sparnschletz in Austria and at Herxheim in Germany. These are usually read as massacres of whole communities in the first centuries after farming arrives, when land starts to matter in a way it never had before. Farming changes the arithmetic. A field is worth defending, a granary is worth taking, and for the first time a whole group can be worth wiping out. Population climbs, and so does the number of people you will never know personally. That combination is what the rest of this video is really about. But notice what none of that is. None of it is punishment. It is violence between groups, or violence with no surviving context. To find punishment, you have to look for something much quieter. Here is the part that reframes the whole question. In a small group, the most powerful tool available is not force. It is reputation. Foraging societies documented in the 20th century tend to run on relentless, low-level social pressure. Teasing, mockery, complaint, gossip that never quite stops. Among the Johoansi of the Kalahari, ethnographers described a practice sometimes called insulting the meat, where a successful hunter's kill is openly belittled so that he cannot use it to raise himself above everybody else. That sounds trivial. It is not. It is a leveling mechanism, and it runs constantly. Because in a group where everyone depends on everyone, the person who takes too much, boasts too much, or refuses to share is a genuine threat to survival. So the first line of enforcement is talk. It is free, it is immediate, and it works because there is nowhere to go to escape it. If talk fails, the pressure escalates. The group withdraws. People stop cooperating with you. You are not fed from the shared kill. And if that fails, there is the real sentence. You are put out. Now think about what exile actually means in the Ice Ages. You cannot hunt large animals alone. You cannot keep a fire alive while you sleep, or keep watch alone, or survive a bad injury with nobody to bring you water. You will not last. Not because anybody laid a hand on you, but because a human being alone is not a viable animal. This is why I think ranking execution methods misses the point entirely. The most lethal punishment our ancestors had did not require a weapon. It required everybody to look away at the same time. And that sentence never really went away. Eventually, it was given a legal name. In early Norse and Icelandic law, a person could be declared a full outlaw. His property was forfeit. Nobody was permitted to shelter or feed him, and anybody who killed him faced no penalty for having done it. Nobody had to carry out an execution. The law simply announced that he was outside it, and left the winter and his neighbors to do the rest. That is the same punishment as being put out of a band of 30, written down, and given a procedure. And there is a version of that which does leave a mark in the ground. Across many periods and many regions, archaeologists find what are usually called deviant burials. The normal dead of a community are laid out a particular way, in a particular place, with particular things. And then a small number of people are not. Face down instead of on the back, heaped in rather than arranged, limbs bound, head removed and placed somewhere else, heavy stones laid on the chest or across the legs, or simply put outside, buried beyond the boundary of the cemetery, away from everyone. And here a warning is needed, because that list has a second possible meaning. Weighting a body down, removing the head, or pinning it in place may not be punishment at all. It may be fear. Plenty of societies have worried that certain dead people would not stay dead. A stone on the chest can be a sentence, or it can be a precaution. From the bones alone, those two things look identical. In later periods, this becomes completely explicit. In Anglo-Saxon England, there are execution cemeteries, separate burial grounds set apart from consecrated ground, holding people with signs of hanging or beheading, buried without care and often without anything at all. Sites like Wockington Wold in Yorkshire have produced groups of skulls separated from their bodies, at exactly the kind of boundary location where those cemeteries tend to sit. The message is not subtle. You are not one of us, and you will not lie with us. And if you believe the dead continue in some form, and there is good evidence humans have behaved that way for a very long time, then that is not just an insult. That is a punishment which does not end when you do. If you have made it this far, it would genuinely help if you liked this video, subscribed, and sent it to one person who would find it strange. It is a small thing for you and a large thing for a channel this size. Now, back to the video, which brings us to the bogs. And the bogs are where this gets genuinely strange. Across Northern Europe, in Denmark, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, and Britain, people spent centuries putting things into peat wetlands. Swords, cauldrons, jewelry, butter, whole wagons, animals, and people. Peat is an extraordinary preservative. It is acidic, cold, and low in oxygen, so bacteria struggle in it. Bone can dissolve, but skin, hair, nails, and stomach contents can survive for 2,000 years. Which means we are not looking at skeletons here. We are looking at faces. Tollen Man was found in Denmark in 1950. He died somewhere around the 4th century before the Common Era. He has stubble on his chin. His eyes and his mouth are closed. His expression is, and there is no better word available, calm. And there is a plaited leather rope pulled tight around his neck. Still there, still knotted. His stomach held a gruel of barley and seeds, eaten roughly 12 to 24 hours before he died. No meat in it at all. Grobel Man, from the same region, had his throat cut. Lindau man, found in Cheshire in England, is the one usually described as a triple death: a blow to the head, a cord tightened around the neck, and a cut throat. That reading is influential, and it is also disputed, partly because some of the damage may have happened in the bog itself, and partly because the tidy idea of a threefold ritual death comes largely from much later Irish literature rather than from the body. Old Croghan man, from Ireland, is around 2,000 years old and was strikingly tall, perhaps a little over 6'6". His hands are soft. Whatever he did with his life, it was not heavy manual labor. He had been cut through beneath the arms, and hazel withies, thin flexible branches, had been threaded through those wounds. His nipples had been cut. The archaeologist Eamon Kelly proposed a specific explanation for that last detail. In early Irish tradition, sucking a king's nipples was a gesture of submission, so mutilating them may have been a way of permanently disqualifying somebody from kingship. That is a hypothesis built by connecting a body to a much later text. It is elegant. It may also be wrong. Eyed girl, from the Netherlands, was around 16 years old. A woolen band was wound 3 times around her neck. About half of her hair was gone. Huldremo's woman, also from Denmark, was found in remarkable clothing. 2 skin capes, a woolen scarf, and a checked wool skirt, all still there. Her right arm had been cut, though whether that happened before or after death is argued. And Cashel man, from Ireland, is the oldest of them, around 4,000 years old, which puts him a full 2,000 years before most of the others, with a broken back and deep wounds. So this was not a brief local fashion. It ran for thousands of years. And now the correction, because you need it. A body called Windaby I, found in Germany, was for decades presented as a teenage girl with her head shaved, executed for adultery, because Tacitus wrote that Germanic peoples shaved and expelled adulterous wives. Later examination indicated the body was most likely a young male, and that the missing hair on one side was probably caused by conditions in the peat and by exposure after excavation, not by a blade. A whole story, told confidently for decades, built on one Roman sentence and an assumption. So what does the Roman evidence actually say? In Germania, Tacitus claims that traitors and deserters were hanged, while cowards and others he considered disgraceful were pressed down into bogs under a covering of hurdles. That is a remarkable match for what we find, and it should still be handled carefully. Tacitus never lived among these people. He was writing about enemies, and he was using their supposed virtues and vices to make points about Rome. When a description matches the evidence that neatly, it is worth asking whether we are reading the bog through Tacitus rather than reading the bog. And there is a strong argument on the other side. The same bogs received swords, gold, food, and animals. Those are offerings. If a wetland is the place where you give things to something, then a body placed there may be a gift rather than a sentence. Several bog bodies also show real care, placed rather than dumped, sometimes covered, sometimes with fine hands and well-kept nails, which does not suggest the lowest ranks of a society. Some researchers read that as evidence of chosen victims, possibly high status, possibly even willing, though we have no way whatsoever to know that. So here is where we honestly stand with the box. We have dozens of people who died violently, were placed deliberately in water, and were preserved well enough that you can look at their faces. And we cannot reliably tell a criminal from an offering. The same body supports both readings, and careful archaeologists say so out loud. Then something changes, and it changes quickly. When people start living in cities, punishment stops being a family matter and starts being written down. The earliest surviving law codes come from Mesopotamia. The code associated with Ur-Nammu is roughly 4,100 years old, and its contents are surprising. A great deal of it is a price list. Compensation in silver for injuries. Payment for a knocked-out tooth, for a broken bone, for an offense against another man's household. Death is reserved for a short list, with murder and robbery on it. Most of the code is about making the injured party whole again. That idea runs far wider than Mesopotamia. In early medieval England, the law codes attached a price to a person, and that price was called the wergild. Kill a man, and you owed his family a set amount, calculated on his rank. Injure him, and there was a figure for the eye, for the ear, for the thumb, for each finger. It reads coldly, but it is doing something important. A payment ends the matter. Without one, a killing obliges the dead man's relatives to answer, and that answer obliges the other family to answer back. That is a feud, and a feud can outlast everybody who started it. Most early law is less about punishing the guilty than about preventing the second killing. The Code of Hammurabi, a few centuries later, is harsher and far more famous, and it introduces something that should sound familiar. If a man is accused and there is no proof, he can be thrown into the river. If the river holds him, he is guilty. If he survives, he is innocent. That is the sky as witness, turned into procedure. When human testimony fails, you hand the decision to something that cannot be bribed. And an ordeal solves a problem that has very little to do with guilt. It lets a community stop arguing. Somebody has to be blamed. Everybody has to accept the outcome, and no living person has to carry the weight of having chosen. Hammurabi's code is also openly unequal. What you owe, and what is done to you, depends on your rank, and on the rank of the person you harmed. And then punishment becomes performance. Rome is the clearest case, and it is worth understanding what crucifixion was actually for. It was slow, it was public, and it was used largely on slaves, rebels, and the lowest status. The point was not simply to end a life. The point was the days of visibility beforehand. Physical evidence for it is astonishingly rare. For a practice used on many thousands of people, we have almost nothing. Part of the reason is that the condemned were frequently denied burial altogether, and the iron nails themselves were valuable, and were sometimes kept afterwards as charms, so they very rarely stayed in the ground alongside the body they had been driven through. In 1968, a tomb at Givat HaMivtar near Jerusalem produced a heel bone with an iron nail still driven through it. And in 2021, archaeologists working at Finstanton in Cambridgeshire in England reported a second one. A heel bone with a nail through it, in a Roman period burial. 2 bones. That is essentially the entire physical record of the most notorious punishment in history. Which tells you something useful about all of this. Absence of evidence in the ground is not absence of the practice. Elsewhere, large-scale killing appears alongside the earliest states. At Anyang in China, capital of the late Shang dynasty, excavations have recovered very large numbers of sacrificial victims in pits and in royal tomb complexes, many of them apparently captives. At Ur in Mesopotamia, the tombs excavated in the 1920s held attendants buried alongside the principal dead. For decades this was described as a peaceful death, taken willingly. Later imaging of some of those skulls indicated blunt force trauma. Whatever happened in those chambers, it appears not to have been gentle, and it appears not to have been optional. Sacrifice or execution. Often, honestly, both. A state that kills captives in a ceremony is doing politics and religion in the same act. So, what did ancient humans do to people who broke the rules? The pattern running through all of this is not a ranking of cruelty. It is a relationship between the size of a group and what punishment is for. In a band of 30, punishment has to end in repair. You cannot afford to destroy a working adult, so you shame, you pressure, you withhold, and only at the very extreme do you cut somebody loose. In a village, punishment starts to be about the boundary. Who lies inside it, and who gets thrown outside it. In a city, punishment becomes a message aimed at everybody who is watching. And that is when it turns theatrical and public and cruel in the way we usually imagine. Cruelty is not what ancient people had instead of law. Cruelty arrives with crowds. And there is one more thing worth holding on to. Almost every body in this video is ambiguous. We cannot prove Talon Man was executed rather than offered. We cannot prove Cranium 17 was justice rather than murder. We cannot prove anyone at Nadirik was bound. What we can see is the care. Somebody closed Talon Man's eyes. Somebody closed his mouth. Whoever put that rope around his neck, or stood and watched it happen, then laid him down in the water on his side with his knees drawn up, as though he were sleeping. We do not know whether that was mercy, or ritual, or guilt. But 2,000 years later, his face is still the most human thing in the room. And that may be the only part of this we can be certain of.